Chapter 2, Poor Neighbors. The Jamestown settlers were a mixed group. Of the original party, 40 men were soldiers, 35 were considered gentlemen. These were rich men who did not have to work. Most of them were trained as soldiers. In English culture, gentlemen were not expected to work as laborers. A person who labors or works is called a laborer. Now, think about this. You're in the same boat or on the same boat in the same settlement as all these men. Everybody's there together. And this group is doing all the work. And this group is sitting around going, I'm too important to work. I'm too rich to work. So that's going to make for a lot of tension. There's going to be a lot of people not getting along because they're going to be resentful that they're doing all the work and they're sitting around doing nothing. The rest of the men were craftsmen. And a craftsman is someone who has a craft, not like arts and crafts, but they're able to do something. They're skilled workers. Blacksmiths, they take iron and they shape it into horseshoes, or, make axe blades, different things like that. Carpenters, which were good with working with wood. Bricklayers, laying brick to make buildings. Those were the laborers, and the laborers did jobs that needed few special skills. Okay, so I just said that wrong. Craftsmen had the skill. Laborers did the work. So the craftsman would say, okay, here's the wood that I'm going to be using to construct this. Will you go chop it? Will you go saw down that tree? So they also grew the crops and they built the houses. The original goal of the settlement was to find gold and silver. It was not planned as a permanent settlement with families. Okay, so they didn't plan on staying there forever. They were just there to get the riches and then leave, which kind of makes me sad too, because I'm thinking about all the land that was destroyed, all the forest, all those animals that lost their home, with them knowing or thinking, we're not going to stay here very much longer. They just wanted something temporary. There were no women among the settlers. The company's organizers in London had told the settlers that they would send more supplies only if the settlers sent back wealth. So the only way they're going to get more supplies to stay there is if they start sending back gold and silver and other riches. The organizers knew that Spanish explorers had found gold in the New World. They expected the same from the Jamestown settlers. As a result, many of the Jamestown men spent their time searching for gold. So they weren't really working on developing this community. They were out looking for the riches. And here you see in the caption, only certain men in the Jamestown group would do manual labor, and that means hard work, like cutting the wood and sawing down the trees. The gentlemen in the group did not want to work like laborers. They felt this work was below them. The first supply ship from England wasn't due to arrive until January 1608. Still, the men spent time planting crops or storing food. They had already received food from the American Indians as a welcome. They thought they could continue to trade for food throughout the winter. But remember, bad relations. We've been stealing from them, taking what didn't belong to us, refusing to trade, just taking it. So are they going to want to help us throughout the winter? No, sir. So at first, the Powhatan traded food in exchange for metal and English manufactured goods. Guns, they wanted the guns. And so they said, we'll give you food if you'll give us guns. This partnership helped the Jamestown settlers survive their first winter. Still, many of the settlers were ill from diseases such as typhoid and dysentery. Dysentery means diarrhea. These diseases probably came from drinking dirty river water or water from wells. This water contained E. coli bacteria from human or animal waste. So the animals and the people were using the bathroom and the water that they were drinking. Ugh. The water supply was also partly salt water, which I talked to you about yesterday. It's called brackish water, which only makes the drinker thirstier because salt makes you thirsty. The location of the settlement was unhelpful too. Those mosquitoes that we talked about yesterday that were undesirable, the mosquitoes in the swampy area carried the disease malaria. and that could kill someone. That made them very sick and almost like out of their head, like kind of makes you go lose your mind. Powhatan and his people had helped the settlers, but in the fall and winter of 1608, the Powhatan became reluctant to trade food. There had been a drought in the area. This limited the corn supply. They needed to feed themselves. So Captain John Smith, remember I said we'd hear more about him later, tried to negotiate with Chief Powhatan. Smith had come to Jamestown with the other settlers. On the way there, he was accused of mutiny, and that means of trying to take over, and he was imprisoned. But when the settlers arrived in Jamestown, they discovered that Smith, remember that secret envelope, had been named as one of the members of the ruling council. So the truth behind that matter is he was bossy. And so he gets on the boat, and the admiral of the boat, the captain, he's like, "You're being too bossy. Go put him in prison." Well, thank goodness he had that personality because of Captain John Smith, there a lot of good things end up happening. So eventually he became president of the settlement, and his strong leadership helped it survive. But he had worked as a soldier before coming to Jamestown, and some of the gentlemen did not like him. They just didn't like his personality. Now, before we go on, let's look at this. They're looking for gold, and when you think of gold, you think of a big gold nugget. No, it's embedded in rock, and then you have to separate it. They smelt it. They melt it. That's called smelting. And when they do, it separates the gold from the other minerals, so the rock that's in there. And then here's a mosquito up close. That's a text feature called a close-up. You can even see the little hairs on his legs almost. And it says they were common in that swampy area of Jamestown. Smith was good at negotiating for food. And what more would you want than to have something to eat? So Powhatan agreed to trade corn for an English house. Okay, so a house that was made of logs, like a log cabin with bricks and everything else. And he said, if you'll give me some more gifts, I'll keep giving you corn. But when Smith provided the gifts, Powhatan was not satisfied. He said, these aren't good enough. He felt that the English were roaming beyond their territory. They were supposed to stay here, and what are they doing? Going and looking for gold. And when they're doing that, they're trampling down their crops. They're taking up their hunting grounds. They're taking over where they should not be. So they were demanding that Powhatan's people give them food and work without pay. They were making them their slaves. So Powhatan told Smith that he had little corn to trade. He would trade 1 bushel of corn. That's like 1 basket of corn for every English sword that the settlers gave him. Smith did not agree to these terms, and after nearly being killed, first by Powhatan and then by another chief, Smith and his men stole some corn and escaped. They returned to the Jamestown fort. The settlers were now at war. The Virginia Company had ordered Smith to develop good relationships with the American Indians. Now Smith felt it was impossible. He believed the Powhatan could not be trusted. Also, the English and the American Indians had very different ideas of land ownership and government. The Native Americans thought the land belongs to everyone and we all should share it and get along. Well, the English thought you take it, you say it's yours, and then you make it yours. And it doesn't matter if anybody else wants to use it, it's yours now. They can't come there. So Smith decided that the only way to make sure Jamestown had food was to take it by force. The English raided American Indian villages. Sometimes they burned crops that they could not take. They destroyed villages. They hurt or killed people living there. Powhatan said the English had invaded his country, so to fight back, his warriors began attacking the settlers. They also killed livestock, which is like sheep and pigs and cows, and they burned their crops in the fields. Smith made changes to keep the colony alive. He created a new rule, and this is a very famous saying: no work, no food. If you did not do work, so those gentlemen who had never done work, their hands were as smooth as a baby's bottom. He said, if you're not going to do the work, then you're not going to get anything to eat. Even the gentlemen of Jamestown had to work like the regular laborers. This made Smith even more unpopular with these men. In September 1608, a second supply ship arrived from England. It carried food, but also more people to feed. The settlers made it through a few winter months, but by late winter, much of their supply of corn was rotten or had been eaten by rats. The Jamestown settlers could no longer trade for food. How would they survive? And I think, dun, 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 it's leaving us on a cliffhanger. So look, this illustration shows the settlers faced attacks from the Powhatan. Okay. Here we see one settler described Chief Powhatan as a goodly old man, not yet shrinking with age. That means he was in good shape. And then there's a portrait of John Smith. That's what they think he looked like. He traveled through Europe, Russia, and Northern Africa before coming to the New World. So he was very well traveled. And remember, he was a soldier. So he was a trained soldier. He knew how to fight. Now, you're going to take your quiz. It's a 5-question quiz on Chapter 2. I'll post the instructions on how to find it on Epic, just like yesterday's quiz. And then I've decided to take it easy on you tomorrow. We're going to watch a couple of videos about Jamestown. And then on Monday, we're going to talk about the series of disasters. So remember, we want to know, how are they going to survive? Oh, it's not easy. There's a series of disasters. And I say this huge storm. Phew, scary. Okay, guys, see you tomorrow.